Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 314 for October 29th, 2023. That's right, a couple days away from Halloween. No scary. I don't think any of us have played any scary games this past few weeks or so. At least I haven't, I know for sure. But with me tonight, I have Mr. Game Logic. Game, how you doing?
Good, Tao. Good, Tao. How are you? It's not for lacking of a scary, spooky game being out. I mean, Alan Wake 2 is out. That's not my particular cup of tea. I'm not a big survival horror fan. So, and actually, quite honestly, I actually have a bona fide pet peeve with Halloween. It is not a preferred holiday of mine. It's kind of a pain in the butt. It's like I always have to tell people, including my family, I'm not off today. It's not a holiday for me. It's not a holiday the next day either after trick or treat. So.
That's right. That's not officially sanctioned holiday. No time off for any of us, actually, or even kids. I mean, they still got to go to school, but it is actually on a Tuesday this year, so we're in the middle of the week or beginning of the week, really. Still, all right. So it's two of us tonight. Unfortunately, it looks like DBU is not able to make it. Hopefully, he'll join us again next week. But let's get going here. It looks like you have the first couple of games here in our main GX stories. Game Logic, still plucking away at Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, I am. I've actually put a good chunk of time into it. I think I'm at about probably 13 to 15 hours at this point. Spider-Man 2 is not like and there's all the reports of people who have platinumed the game and, people who have gone on and done stuff. Like, I'm not a trophy hunter. I'm not somebody who rushes through games. The most important thing is that I spend time playing a game. That's actually more important to me than finishing. Every time I boot Spider-Man 2 up, just like the same with Miles Morales or Spider-Man, it's always a 50-50 chance as to whether or not I'm going to actually play through the campaign or just grind for suits, which I have done a chunk of in Spider-Man 2. And actually, I was mistaken last week when I told you guys I thought I was about 50% complete through the suits. I didn't realize that there was a whole nother page of suits because I hadn't scrolled on the screen. So, because I'm not on PC. So, it turned out I had twice as many suits to go through. But I also saw where, some of the bonus suits I had gained were down there at the bottom. So, I'm doing what I normally do, which is, changing suits every 10 minutes. And just playing through the game. And, sometimes, like I said, sometimes I grind for suits, sometimes I mainline the campaign. It's interesting through maybe the first 8, 9, maybe 10 hours or so. I was actually dedicated to the stealth game. And so, when I went into those situations where you could kind of, wall crawl around the ceiling or elevated heights and kind of take some enemies out, I would spend a lot of time doing that. And actually, that was kind of necessary for certain parts of the game. But as I've grown more powerful, and I'm at the point now where Peter has the black suit. But on top of that, and so I mentioned last week, I thought it was kind of neat in a game balance perspective between the two characters because I've always felt like Miles has the more powerful power set. But I thought it was neat that that it appeared that Pete's skill tree was wider and deeper than Miles's was. And I was like, oh, okay, well that's a way for them to kind of compensate with Peter. So what's interesting is that it turns out that other branch is actually for the black suit. And so I'm curious to see what's going to happen because obviously theoretically, it's not a spoiler, but what we think as the game progresses is that he gains the suit and then at some point he loses the suit. So, be curious whether or not, I guess that other branch would go away. I don't know if they're going to flip them over into some other power or, I'm just not sure. So what I do really like about the suit is, yet again, I don't think this is a spoiler because I think you could pretty much surmise that it would be this way. Peter gets angry when he's in the suit and he becomes more powerful. He's just more brutal and it's more visceral. In his attacks and in his finishing moves. And so, Peter is one of those kind of characters that, Batman, you don't really worry or feel for Batman holding himself back. Like Batman gets angry, people get hurt, people get bones broken. But with Peter, you always feel like he's holding a little back, like he's taking a little easy on people, and you feel like it's very rare, right, that he really gets spooled up to the point where he's really angry and he really takes that aggressiveness out on people. And you start seeing that when he's wearing the black suit, and it's kind of satisfying in a certain way. But by the same token, whether it's by game design or whatever, the power set that I've achieved with Miles right about the same time is also significantly more powerful. And so now I get to the point where, depending on who the enemies are, and even to a certain extent, I talked about last week how I felt the hunters, right, really kind of ramped up the skill set to the point where I was actually like nervous, like going in and fighting them. And now that you have the flame guys who are kind of like a slight notch above the other underground, you kind of have these 4 tiers of fight where you have like the regular thugs, the flame people, the hunters, and then bosses. And, in each one kind of ratchets up the anxiety of, how nervous you feel in the fight. But now with Miles and Peter, like now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, if I don't see like that many of them, or I just, I'm like, yeah, I'm not bothering with stealth at this point. So, or I may, earlier in the game, I was really meticulous about like literally going around and taking everyone out except like the last guy. But, now it's, sometimes, like I said, I won't bother with stealth, or I'll take out like the one guy or maybe 2 people. And then as soon as, particularly there's one of the things that happens in levels is, you go up to these kind of, temporary outpost assaults is kind of how I think about them. And there are, tiers of enemies that are separated by altitude. And there's always like some levels where, it's really hard to, like, you really have to be picky and choosy. And sometimes you have to like, make a horizontal web line, which, to create a plane whereby you can go over and get some of these guys who are kind of at these weird like in-between levels where you can't get down low enough to get them, because then you're in the line of sight of, some other enemy. So, I mean, now I'm getting to the point now where like when I hit those in those, raids, I'm just like, yeah, forget, like I'm not being bothered with stuff. I'm powerful enough at this point that I don't have the fear that I used to have. And like I said, I've unlocked, a chunk of suits, or some really awesome suits. In fact, I know some people have complained about like there are certain suits that are ugly. You unlock certain suits just by doing certain types of missions, so it's not even a matter of grinding for them necessarily. But all the suits are interesting enough to me that like there's no suit that I won't wear, for at least 10 minutes. So I'm having a blast. I was not as endeared to the Arkham series as a lot of other people were. I don't think that was due to any fault of the game. I just think, I wasn't quite in that mindset, or just didn't rock with those games as much when they came out. But man, I'm having a blast. I've had a blast right this entire time between Spider-Man Remastered, Miles Morales, and this game.
I don't remember. Did you finish the first one and Miles Morales? Did you ever finish them?
I haven't completed them. No.
You haven't completed them. Okay. And then I was looking up the suits. It was like almost 80 suits. I was like, wow, that's a lot. I mean, compared to some games nowadays where it might give you just a handful.
Yeah, I don't know if so.
So I think 78 was. The
probably pretty close, because there's probably close to 24 to 28 suits per character. So yeah, definitely it can definitely get up there in the numbers.
Now, are most of the suits you've gotten so far, or maybe that you've seen, are they like basically like the comic or like movie related, or some variant of those kind of suits?
They're probably half. I haven't gone back and like I've pulled the thread on the lore enough to know that there are some suits there that actually appeared in the comics. That like when you pull the thread on them, you'll find out. So a lot of the suits are like from some Spider-Man from some other part of the Spider-Verse. So they were never actually like Peter Parker. Like, okay, yeah, they were never actually 616 Peter Parker or Miles Morales. Some of them, I suspect some of them are like what if suits. But there are definitely some suits where there are comic book creators that were commissioned by Insomniac, right, to come up with an idea for the suit just for the game.
That's pretty
And
cool.
so there are a couple of those in there as well. But yeah, eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and Google the history and and the lore or whatever behind each of the suits. But I haven't done that at this point. I'm just running around and collecting them.
Yeah. Now you mentioned some of them you just unlock on missions and stuff. Do you just like find them too, like when you're swinging around, or is it mostly just doing objectives and that kind of thing?
Yeah, as far as I know, there it's I mean the it's either there's like two different types of currency in the game basically. Maybe actually that's there's probably like four. There's like hero tokens, rare tech tokens, and city points. I think is one. And so each of them get doled out via different types of missions. And but there are like a handful that like there's a it's kind of actually interesting. I hadn't really thought about it. I realized it in a lot of ways in the way that Starfield was. There are missions that are basically kind of mini campaigns. I mean, there's side missions that are side missions like in 5, 6, or 7 like discrete chapters, and multiple missions, in addition to like the mainline campaign. So so those, yeah, you do all. I think there's one called like the cultural center, like side missions or whatever. And so like if you do all of those, then you unlock like a unique suit. So I haven't unlocked that one yet, but but that's for instance one kind of set of things you can do to get access to a suit that isn't necessarily grinding for a certain type of currency in the game.
Uh, there was someone had posted a video on one of the discords I'm on, and then it just kind of shows a person like I think they're underground somewhere, maybe even like at a parking garage or something. I was like, oh wow, what is this game? And then they started swinging through the city, like jumped out of the wherever they were and started swinging around. I was like, man, this game looks really pretty. Like I didn't like it. I'd seen clips of some of the other ones before, like the original one in Miles Morales. And yeah, it looked good, but this one like just kind of seems like they kind of bumped up the graphics and the fidelity and all that, so it was looking really nice.
And so DBQ says he is backstage on the StreamYard. So if he I don't know if he has the wrong link
Hmm.
or something. But yeah, we'll he should hopefully he'll be joining us soon. So I will try
Okay.
and get him in. But yeah, I'm sorry. But your question was, how are the graphics on the game?
Yeah, just that it looked from the clip that I had seen, and like I mean, I like it seemed like it was like kind of no, I don't want to say leaps and bounds from the first one, but it was definitely like it looked like there was a bump up in graphics and just how it looked. As I think it was Miles because it didn't look like Peter unless maybe he had a different suit on or something. But they just started him showing swinging around and stuff. I was just like, wow, this looks really good. So kind of wanted me to go back and at least buy the original game so I can get ready for this one when it hopefully eventually goes to PC.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like if you haven't played the games, these games on PC, they are definitely worth a go.
All right. All right. And I'll jump over to mine just real quick, just give you a break so you can see if you can get DB in. So I jumped back into Zenith or Zenith. I don't know how they actually pronounce it, but me and my friend call it Zenith. It's a VR MMO. It's actually, I think you can play it standalone on the standalone Quest 2 or 3 now. But I play it through PC VR right now, which I'm using my Quest 3, but I just use the cable link. So I jumped back into that. My friend wanted us to jump back into that game to just to start playing again. I guess they've had a bunch of major updates recently and kind of rework some things. And so he was like, "Oh, let's jump back in." So I was like, "All right, cool." I mean, I enjoyed it before, and we just kind of fell off of it. So I know he kind of, I think at one point he had maxed out maybe one character. I think he had started maybe another one right before we had stopped playing originally. And I think this was about a year ago. I think when it was released, I believe originally. So we jumped back in, and I don't know if it's the game or if it's just MMOs in general. Because sometimes I have a hard time jumping into those, even or jumping back into them. Like even DC Universe, every once in a while, we'll go into, and it takes me a while to kind of get used to the controls and stuff. But this one was like just just way ahead of me, like just trying to fumble like for controls and stuff. I think maybe well, it was partly too because of the reworking of some of the menu systems and stuff. Like I had trouble kind of figuring out what I needed to do and how to like upgrade my character and stuff like that. So we played, was it Friday night for like a couple hours, I think, hour and a half maybe. And most of that for me at least was me just trying to get used to it again. He had jumped in a little bit, I think, during the week, so he was able to get more adjusted, or he had a little bit more time to adjust to everything. But it took me a little while to get into it. And then, of course, we're playing kind of late, and I usually game later, at night. Once my family goes to sleep, so that probably didn't help either. And it was a Friday night, and just like all long week and all that too, so that probably didn't help. But finally got a little bit into it, like I said, right before we stopped playing. But I want to definitely jump back into it a little bit more, maybe tonight or during the week coming up. So, but we were just kind of I had, I think I was a level 22 character that I still had from before, and he had actually just started completely over. So he was only like level, I think like 4 or 5 when we started up again. So we were just trying to get him kind of more up to speed. And I think in the 2 days since, he's pretty much caught up to me as far as level. So when we jump back in, we should be pretty good. And we were trying to we're even he was at that point too when we start playing again. We were having a hard time trying to just figure out like what are the missions we're supposed to be doing, and how to figure out what's what, because it's like sometimes we'd get a mission from somebody, like there's just people kind of like in the hub areas in the different cities in the game you get quests from, but like we get stuff and like we couldn't do anything. So I don't know if it was because I was a higher level, or maybe because he was lower level than me. But it just sometimes like the quest wouldn't be there, like it'd be totally gone from our quest list. So I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I think he kind of figured that out too. So hopefully when we play next, it'll be fine since we're both up to speed now. But yeah, having a good time in that. Kind of this one's a little bit kind of color palette wise, it's a lot different from Dungeons of Eternity, which I played only a little bit, unfortunately, this past week and weekend. This is a lot brighter. It's a lot of more colors and stuff. So, which I guess he was kind of telling me sometimes that kind of can get to people, I guess, as far as like kind of motion sickness. But I never had troubles with that game because you kind of it's not super fast paced, but you do kind of fly around, and you can jump and stuff, and there's a lot more to do than like say like Dungeons of Eternity or some of the other games we played, like Arizona Sunshine Level 8. It's a little slower paced, but I don't know. I didn't have a problem with this one, so I think one of maybe his other friends, because he was thinking I had an issue with this, but I was like I never had an issue with Zenith, so I was like I'm fine with it. But I think one of the other guys he was playing with was kind of got motion sickness every once in a while, but I seem to be fine. Oh, so and plus I've been playing a lot more lately, so I didn't get that motion sickness like sometimes it happens, but still we'll keep plugging away at it hopefully this week and kind of keep going at it more. DB, welcome. How are
Yeah,
you?
thanks. I'm good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me drop in after the show had started. So sorry about the technical issues on my end.
No, no problem.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
And just in time on the schedule for me to talk about stuff.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, Game Legend went through Spider-Man. I kind of skipped over his Baldur's Gate 3, but if you want to go ahead and go through what you've been playing lately.
yeah, so I have seen Game Logic on playing some Spider-Man. I mean, I have on the PlayStation 5. I have played a little bit, but really I just haven't had that much time until later this week. And actually the game I've played the most this week is a new release called Slay the Princess. This is a indie game on PC. It is more or less a visual novel. I had played the demo back in the summertime. It kind of has a unreliable narrator. You're basically, it's exactly what the title is. You start off the game and your job is there's a princess chained up in a dungeon, and your job is to kill her.
Hey DBQ, I really hate to interrupt. Can you just quickly, because I don't know that everyone who watches our show will know what an unreliable narrator is as a literary device.
Yeah, that's a very fair. Thank you for that. So that would be like, it is somebody who what you're hearing the narrator tell you is not necessarily the truth within the game, right? Like sometimes you get the unreliable narrator that's remembering something that happened, and really that's not actually the way it happened. You get that in films, sometimes you get it in novels, in video games. I think of what Call of Juarez was a game back on the 360 Xbox days where there was an Ubisoft game where you had an unreliable narrator, right? It's telling you something that isn't actually the way that it happened. And in this case, it is a narrator who is telling you things, but maybe not telling you all of it. Or as you go on, you learn that the narrator doesn't actually know all of it as well. And so there is this kind of narration within the game, and there is this larger kind of meta narration and storytelling that's going on as you go through. And so it starts off relatively simple, or relatively what seems relatively straightforward, and you're presented with a series of choices. And I there is only so much I can say without starting to give stuff away. But you the game does not end when you slay the princess. That you have some choices about, maybe you talk to her, maybe you try to kill her, maybe she fights back. Um, but you end up in kind of without giving too much of away, like if you kill her the first time, it's not the end of the game. There are some loops that go through, and this is where the unreliable narrator piece comes in, is that you're kind of stuck. Maybe you're stuck in a loop. Maybe you're jumping in between different timelines. Maybe you are reliving this in various capacities. But as you start to see and interact with the princess, she's aware that this is not your first time either. She remembers the previous times up to a point, and then there is kind of a world reset, and you keep going back through it. So you can have a couple iterations of slaying the princess, and then you hit a world reset based on certain events that happen, and you get some more narrative pieces, and then you are sent back in to kind of do it again. But as you're going through it in these world resets, the choices that you made the last time, or the iterations of choices that you made the last time, are not available to you. So it's forcing you to kind of go down multiple narrative paths. And as somebody who grew up with choose your own adventure books, right? Like this is just fun, right? It's got a little bit of horror in it, a little bit of monster like aspects to it, not a lot, but there is this kind of overarching eeriness, creepiness to it, in terms of, that there's more going on. It's all kind of like pencil sketch, black and white in the art style. There's two voice actors. There's the narrator who does a couple different voices, and then there's a female voice actress, and both really have a range in terms of, as the characters go through different things, the level of emotion and energy or anger that they bring to the characterizations help what are eventually kind of essentially static pictures have it much more of a kind of visual novel, almost an audio experience. So it was something that in the demo, if you're interested, play the demo. It kind of tips you into this world without necessarily kind of showing its hand in terms of what's it's doing. And now that I've played it through a couple cycles, I am starting to see what it's doing, but I have not necessarily played enough of it to kind of have come to the full end. Reading some reviews, most of them are pretty cagey in terms of what it actually is, but there's a full run that is about 4 hours long. But even as I'm going through this, I'm thinking, oh, I want to go back and try this the next time to see what path it opens up, how this goes. That, last week I was on the show pretty excited reasonably about the two games, with Spider-Man 2 and Mario Wonder. I was, those are going to be games that are going to show up on my superlative list at the end of the year. I was pretty hyped about them. But this is a game that I wouldn't be surprised ends up in my kind of narrative storytelling category on the superlative list, in terms of both the character interactions, and then also kind of the meta narrative wrapper that it is doing. So it's Slay the Princess. It's on PC, just came out this week.
Nice. So how did you hear about this game, or did you know about it already?
I heard about it on a podcast back in the summertime. It was kind of came out in one of Steam's Next Fests, and
Okay.
somebody was talking about it. I think it might have been Jeff Kanata and DLC. I might have picked it up there.
Okay. Nice. Well, I'm glad you're here, because I thought it was like a Slay the Spire sequel or something. So, All right. Game Logic, any comments on that? If not, if you want to jump back, we'll jump back to you so we can get to your second game.
Well, I've got a couple of alibis. So first of all, for you, Tao, Zenith, are you playing with the MetaQuest controllers, or is that a one where you wear a headset and then use a game controller?
No, I'm just using the MetaQuest. Yeah. It's
okay.
full.
And then so when you play VR, you're playing multiplayer games. So, or
For the most part.
does the MetaQuest 3, I can't remember, does it have a built-in headset, or are you using like a third-party headset along with it?
Well, I mean, it has the speakers in it and the mic. So in the past, I have thrown on a headset too, because you can just plug in the headset. It has the 3.5 millimeter.
So does chat come through in game then?
For this game, yes. You can also you can kind of do, I wouldn't say it's like a party, but you can do like a call through the headset to, like for a friend or whatever, or a group of friends, group of people. And then that'll take over whatever's, going in when you're going into a game. It's kind of like, Gamepad or Xbox, or I'm sure PS5 too. You can do the same thing where that party system kind of takes over the voice for you. But yeah, just in game.
And then DBQ for Slay the Princess. So I guess two questions. Number one, you mentioned the art style. Is the art style anything similar to like Pentiment?
Pentiment really is that kind of like medieval European kind of parchment art style. No, this is
kind of Victorian.
Yeah, I would even maybe a little further back than Victorian, right? Like this is very much kind of graphic novel-y, but with kind of loose pencil sketches, right? So
Okay,
So is
very
that-
cool.
Just to kind of tack on to his question. So because I know you said it's kind of like a visual novel. Is it animated, or is it just kind of like static, or kind of both?
I expected it to just to be static. There's a couple zooms of the camera. There are some nice features where the panels are split up into separate, like the screen is split up into separate panels, and as you move your mouse around, the orientation kind of shifts a little bit to give a little bit, right? It's not really movement, but it provides a sense of motion in the storytelling.
It sounds like you're playing Take On Me. The video
right?
game.
Like nobody's busting through walls yet. All right. Like, yes. So yeah, that is when I think of pencil styles, that's exactly what I was thinking of as well. Game Logic. Like it's a little more than the AHA video, but you get that idea.
Does it give it like that 3D, kind of like the Marvel Snap when you do the 3D variants?
You
or is
get
it
a
more
little
than
bit of that with the scenery, not so much
Okay.
with the characters, but yes,
Yeah.
that's kind of my reference point as well as like the cards in Marvel Snap. Once you get them to the point where they can pivot.
Okay. Nice.
And is it a roguelike?
No, it is.
Okay.
It is specifically a narrative game. There is not even through multiple iterations, there is not like a persistent unlockable kind of leveling aspect here. It is solely narrative driven. You are there for the story, and I wouldn't even really call there gameplay because you're just making choices.
So is it, I mean, clearly not maybe in style, but just in terms of kind of game design, is it similar to Disco Elysium?
Disco Elysium, you're navigating the world as well, right? You're getting a lot of those kind of narrative of interactions, but this is pretty much, it feels almost like the amount that you navigate the world feels like an early 80s computer game, right? Like you have an image on the screen and you're going to click, are you going to go through that door, or are you going to approach the mirror? Are you going to pick up the knife, or are you going to go down the stairs, right? And then when you do that, you get a little bit of motion that moves you to the next screen to do that. So it's very static screens in that way until you make a choice.
Okay, gotcha. Baldur's Gate 3 on the Steam Deck. And so, as you might imagine by this slightly unique piece of equipment in and amongst the segment one of our game show. It has been a week in small adventures in hardware. So actually, one of the reasons it took me a little longer to get back to the mic than I had expected in pre-show when I told Tao I was running to go grab my coffee is because Amazon had delivered very late a new case and a cooler. Because I have yet another PC, the second one this year, that I have to go in and do some emergency surgery on due to bad temps. The first one was CyberPower PC's fault, and this one is maybe I wouldn't say my fault, but definitely just a little learning curve, right? It was the first one that I built with one of these extreme AMD processors, the R9 5950X. And the case that I put it in it's a pretty slimline ATX case, so it only has one exhaust fan. It only has two exhaust fans in the back, whereas most of my burlier rigs have three. And then and it only accommodates a 240 millimeter cooler. And at the time that I built that case, the 5950X was just out. There wasn't a ton known about it. Cooling Solutions, people had told you, just they were making guesses. There wasn't really things that the vendors had come out and really spec'd and said, yay, verily, this cooler is good for that processor. So now in years since, in a year hence, I do see, documentation that says this should be on a 280 millimeter, AIO or bigger. And mine's only on a 240. So, and since that time, I've done a couple other water cooled rigs, and I've gotten to the point where in general, I'm just not building a rig, without a 360 millimeter cooler. So, like I said, I had to go in and do kind of emergency surgery for bad cooling on a CyberPower PC box. That's actually the box that I'm on tonight and that I was on last week. And that surgery went very well. The patient has recovered and is proceeding on leading a full, healthy life. So I'm hoping to have the same success with this other box.
Seems to be doing fine, I guess.
Yeah. But I was mentioning, when I went up to go grab coffee, Amazon had left the case and cooler on my front porch, and I hadn't gotten like a Ring doorbell alert. So, but it was a very heavy box, so I had to lug it down here. This week I had tried to play on that box that I've got to do the changes on, and I tried to play a little Star Citizen, and then started, getting some crashes, and I'm like, these crashes look an awful lot like the crashes that I saw on Forza Horizon 5, and then a lot like the crashes that I saw on Halo Infinite. And I said, let me try and wind this back and play some Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. And so I played a little bit of that, saw things, but I was like, at that point, I just decided to pull the trigger on the cooling upgrade, because I was like, well, I'm not going to use this box with a 5950X and a 3070 Ti in it to play games from 10 years ago. So while all that was going on, I decided to pull up my Steam Deck because it was there sitting ready to go and play some Baldur's Gate 3. We don't talk a lot on this show about graphical fidelity on the Steam Deck. There's a lot of, hullabaloo out there where, there are, people who write these like incredibly detailed, I would say arguably maybe overly detailed commentary on like how a game looks on the Steam Deck, a big AAA game looks on the Stream Deck, and how many frames per second it gets. And like, it just with new games that play on the Steam Deck, they're just going to be playable. Like there's nothing like you're not getting over, having a better experience, or I mean the nicety of the thing is that it makes it mobile, it makes it in portable format, and to a certain extent, like you guys have over the years with the Nintendo Switch, I'm maybe coming around a little bit to where I'm finding the relax in it being fine for me to be around my house, right, on a handheld, versus I always felt that like with portables, I was like, well, unless I'm taking it on travel, then I don't really, get anything out of the portability. But it is kind of nice to kind of kick back, in a chair and, turn off, a beast of 12 fans, from running to play games on, and even to have the consoles running. And, just relax a little bit, and play. So I got back into Baldur's Gate 3, and I was also scared. I had it loaded a while back, but every time I was thinking about going into it, I got a little scared. So man, it's such a complex game with all the dialogue trees, and I just don't know how this is going to look, or my ability to like manage inventory. I think managing inventory was the big thing that I was scared of. There are some things that seem to happen to the game, and I don't know if they're happening because I'm playing on controller, meaning that I played it in handheld mode, but it detects the control surfaces as a controller, and I don't know if it's because of that or just because of or if it actually did some scaling that's unique because of the screen and the resolution. But when I go in to play it, it does not have like that whole menu tile thing at the bottom of the screen. Which actually I think I would have actually preferred, but it uses pull-up menus in a radial, like as you would expect, as if I was on a console. It pulls up radials, which you flip. There's like 3 pages of radials, which you flip back and forth with the L1 and R1 buttons. So that took me a little while to get used to. I kind of defaulted to starting every fight, starting off with the things on the first radial. So I was like, well, I need to get a little more tactically sophisticated than that. But it worked itself out fine. I think what I like about it, what I will eventually like about it with regards to playing something big and complex and meaty like Baldur's Gate 3 is it was kind of neat to jump on a handheld and just quickly grind out like a single increment, right, of a mission or a chapter or a set piece in the game, rather than, the way that I feel approaching the game when I'm on my desktop, which is I need a 2-3 hour block, right, to feel like I get anything significant done. So I went in last night. I played. There's a part of the Goblin Village, where you have the option to free a gnome. So I played through that chapter of event in the thing. I suspect that I will see that character again, because he made multiple points of foreshadowing that the decisions I made and how I treated him were going to have consequences. So that was pretty neat. And then I played through like a little bit of a set piece that kind of revealed some of the background of Shadow. I can't remember what the last syllable of her name is, but I played through that and then started getting the 10% and then 5% alert. It was in the middle of a cutscene. Please hold on to get to this cutscene. And fortunately, then it went to a dialogue tree. And fortunately, when you're in a dialogue tree, you could still escape out and make a manual save. So I was able to successfully pull off a manual save with like 3% battery left. So it's pretty neat. I definitely need to chalk it down to spend some more time with the Valve Steam Deck before the next thing comes out, or some other handheld comes along that really like supersedes the Valve Steam Deck's capabilities that I get attracted to as the new shiny. But other than that, yeah, I had a pretty good time.
Got to keep that power cable close to you. That's what you got to do so you can plug it in.
Well, I have it. So I use a dock, right? So I mean, and so the way the dock works is it doesn't connect directly to the power cable. When you sit it on the dock, it has a dock. I mean, it uses the C port essentially as a docking cable. So once I put it in the dock, I'm not playing it, anymore. At that point, it would switch it over to desktop mode. Now I could pick up a controller and continue playing it that way, but I'm not. But in general, I mean, I play an hour and a half, or 2 hours at a time, and for the most part, that should support a session on the Valve Steam Deck pretty decently, unless I'm playing something super high end, like Forza Motorsport or something like that, that's gonna drain the battery life really quickly.
Yeah. All right. Doesn't it have like a little mouse pad or mouse thing, or no?
It does. It has 2 pads on the left and right side, but
okay.
They're very wonky. I've never particularly thought about really use it. I will use them as a left click and a right click button, but I never use them as pads. I mean, in most games, your thumbsticks will correspond to mousing around the screen, so it's usually not a problem.
Yeah. Okay, nice. All right. DB, any comments on that? Or?
No, you answered my big question, game logic, in terms of kind of the text and all the menus on the Steam Deck and how that handled. So
I would say this is again, the Steam Deck is kind of a weird culture where you get so many games that are basically like a yellow thing, which immediately makes you leap to, oh, there's something really big with it, and like 90% of them are renders text in a way that, and I'm like, yeah, but actually this game is one of the rare ones that it's actually full green when you look at the compatibility stoplight chart. And it has no problems with rendering text. I'm able to see the dialogue trees fine and not really make any adjustments, for it being on handheld.
Yes. What's the screen size on the deck again? Do you know?
What is it on this? Is the Switch a 7-inch screen?
I think it's just under a 7-inch, I believe.
Yeah, I want to say I'll fact check it, but I think it's like 8-inch or it's something slightly larger than the Switch screen. I thought
maybe the OLED is probably 7-inch now. I would assume the older one, I think, is just under 6 or just under 7.
Steam Deck is 7 inches.
7 inches.
Okay, yeah. I thought for some reason the screen was a little bigger, but
yeah. And I think the OLED is just a little bigger than the original, so they're pretty similar.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's jump out of the GX stories and jump into the news for the past week. Game Logic. So a couple weeks ago, I got to talk about my favorite non-game that was delayed indefinitely.
From the same company, by the way.
Yeah, from the same company. So now, if you want to jump into your first story and then have some Ubisoft news.
Yeah, this was kind of poignant because, like I said, I had gone back and played Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which kind of the DNA for this game goes back to. But the story over on Rock Paper Shotgun, Ubisoft delays Skull and Bones yet again, together with a mystery large game. And I think that might be the one that we actually spend more time talking about. Ubisoft's multiplayer Jolly Raj Up Skull and Bones is Generation Z. Please. With the writing. Anyway, Roger Pub Skull and Bones is caught on the reefs once again. Recently tipped to appear in early fiscal year 2023-2024. It's now due to make landfall in the publisher's FYQ4. So I guess that's F. It should be FY24 Q4. Sometime between January and March 2024. What's the golden age of piracy equivalent for vaporware? I'm picturing a spectral vessel like the Flying Dutchman, crewed by glum-faced producers with a big grimacing statue of company CEO Yves Guillemot affixed to the prow. Skull and Bones delayed again. They've had numerous team leadership turnovers there. What I will say is I'm still rolling the dice and putting my money on it's Ubisoft. They will spend money to stick with the game. If they were going to put a fork in this thing and cancel it and be done with it, it would have been done already. This thing is coming out. And I've had an opportunity to play an alpha build of it in a test. I guess I assume that I'm allowed to say that by this point. Yeah, so what I saw in terms of numbers of systems that were in place. Again, I stick with this thing's coming out. I don't think there's any way it's going back in the garage, and getting the engine pulled out and just becoming a hangar queen for parts. I think the bigger question is, and this all came out of earnings reports, which are starting to come out. Microsoft put their earnings report out last week. I think PlayStation's will be next week, But the other thing that came out in their earnings report dialogue was that this is not the only game that is being delayed. Ubisoft have also pushed back a mysterious large game that was originally due before the end of their current fiscal year to the next fiscal year, which means at some point after 31 March 2024. And so people think that this is Star Wars Outlaws. Now, I don't know that I think the only date we had for Star Wars Outlaws was 2024.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know that there was anything that put it into this fiscal year versus next fiscal year. And I mean, I guess I always assumed that it was a next fall type of game, that it wasn't an early 2024 game. But, Ubisoft also assumed that, Beyond Good and Evil 2 is coming out at some point in time. So, but yes, right. The large game is what the report said. So whether that's one of the Assassin's Creed games that is, what is it? The Japan one that kind of had some of the protagonists potentially leak over this past week, or if it's Star Wars, or if it's something else.
Well, they've got Avatar coming out in December. They have Ramon Terrell just popped into the chat, who's a friend of the show, also hangs out over in the Basement Radio Arcade podcast, mentions, yo, I can't believe I'm actually off and able to tune in. So thanks very much, Ramon, for being able to tune in. We appreciate you. So we've got Avatar coming out in December. They have the Prince of Persia thing that's coming out. That is coming out in Q1 calendar year 24. So I quite honestly, I think they've got room to push this. I think, quite honestly, I think for this game, April, May, June, which Q1 of their fiscal year 24, would be fine. That kind of keeps it away from anything that's going to try to make a big splash in the holiday season. The console platform owners coming out with anything major first party in that time frame, I think would be fine to give this game, room to breathe. And I think there's even room to push it, further than that. I don't believe, and I would have to believe that Ubi is doing something for the launch of the Switch 2, because they are always there at console launches, with very few exceptions. I think they've got room. I don't know. Do you guys think differently?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but I forgot about Avatar, but yeah, that was supposed to be this year anyways. So
that's a December release. So
yeah,
and looking back at this, it seems like I'm trying to remember. It points to that it's something that was scheduled to come out in first quarter, or the last quarter of this fiscal year, so the first 3 months of 2024, which really there's not that many things that were on Ubisoft's release calendar that could be that, because they've either cleared the decks, they've pushed back, the one game with swabbing the decks, and the things that have been kind of announced, like the tweet about Division 3, there's no date or anything else around there. So there's not a whole lot sitting in its kind of announcements from this past summer left that hasn't been accounted for in some fashion.
Yeah, and I don't know that anything has been ascribed to the Assassin's Creed games. I mean, I think all we know is that they're working on them?
Yeah, no, I take my Jade speculation back, because that is not... that may have a 2024, but it's not. It was never promised early. It may be at the end. I don't even know if there was a date. So
yeah. The only other thing is the VR game, which probably, I mean, you wouldn't. I don't think you'd call that a large scale of game. So even though it's getting a lot of good previews, but it's a smaller one. Even though it is an Assassin's Creed game. But I think that's supposed to come out, I think next month, November, I believe, if I remember correctly. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of corroboration on like any specific dates about a lot of the stuff. It's just, 2024.
Yeah. All right. We talked about Spider-Man 2 earlier, Game Logic, or you did, I should say, because you've been playing it. You got some news here.
Yeah, this article over on a Game Informer, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is the fastest-selling PlayStation Studios game ever. Marvel Spider-Man 2 has only been available for 3 days, but the critically acclaimed sequel has already become the fastest-selling PlayStation Studios game in the brand's history. In a press release, Sony Interactive Entertainment states that over 2.5 million copies of the game have been sold within the first 24 hours of launch. The publisher didn't provide a breakdown in terms of physical versus digital, but that's an impressive number for the PS5 exclusive. And that's the thing to consider, is that this is a game that's only available on PlayStation 5. So I think the article goes on to cite like the nearest closest performance metric that we know of. 2018 Spider-Man also was the fastest of its time, with 3.3 million sold within the first 3 days of launch. And then I think there was, I want to say God of War Ragnarok was 5 million in the first week or something like that. So, tomato, 6 of one, half dozen the other. The sales numbers, that are given aren't really comparable, unless you do a ton of calculations, which again will only get you close to a guess. But at the end of the day, the key thing that we can see is that summer blockbuster movie, video game, last year with God of War Ragnarok, performing well to commercial success, and then a repeat of that performance right a year later. I think is the major pertinent nugget to be, kind of pull from it.
Ramon shoots out in the chat, right? Considering the kind of install base of the platform, the attach rate. I think I was thinking along those same lines, Ramon, like where the PlayStation 4 was in Marvel Spider-Man's original launch, like that install base was much greater at that point. But I guess this is a kind of peak Spider-Man moment, right? You have the momentum from the first game, you have the momentum from Miles Morales, you have the momentum behind Across the Spider-Verse, and some of the kind of co-marketing, because in the last month in September, the Blu-ray streaming all came out for that movie. So there's kind of this Spider-Man building aspect here. So in terms of the kind of cultural consciousness, potentially, but it is surprising. And I think your point too, Game Logic, in terms of 24 hours versus 3 days versus a week, like some of that, I also wonder if it is because of the quantity and volume and percentage of digital sales versus physical sales from 2018 when Spider-Man was there, right? Like it took you longer to get those sales numbers in if it wasn't a pre-order, and so if it was a physical copy, and so with more digital sales, you can pull out this metric without necessarily diminishing the other two.
Yeah, and of course you have, ones being sold with the collector's edition and ones being sold with bundles. So, it's a good news story. I mean, like I said, I think I said on the show maybe last week or maybe a few weeks back, it continues to be impressive, Insomniac's productivity, during this generation, putting out Ratchet and Clank, the remaster, Miles Morales, now this game, and us getting Wolverine, if not in 2024, then probably in 2025. And then what shocks me is to consider that based solely on their productivity and the engines that they have in place and the things that they can capitalize on, it's even possible that we will get another game from Insomniac right before this generation's over. So, in the past I've talked about, Turn 10's productivity and Playground Studios' productivity. I think that's a crown that I have firmly snatched away from Turn 10, with kind of the muddle that was, wound up being 2017 to 2023 in the release of this year's Forza Motorsport. But back in the years leading up to then, the proliferation of games from the combination of Turn 10 and Playground, and what they did for their racing genre, with Forza and the Forza Motorsport series in combination, in comparison to Gran Turismo, which we've commented very frequently on this show, is like, I don't like that freaking title comes out like whenever the heck it feels like it, and now here we have Insomniac, right? It kind of being the 2020s version of that, and doing it, as a single studio. I think the biggest concern now is, they've talked about Spider-Man DLC, which is appropriate. They're doing Wolverine. At the end of the day, I don't need every studio to do a pivot like Guerrilla Games did. But I'm also not sitting here cheerleading, the notion, look, I love superheroes. I love comic books. I've loved the MCU. Everybody knows that. Even I, in all my selfishness, don't want Insomniac to become like the Marvel superhero, shop studio. Particularly with the way that Disney has just been, riding that horse, with a riding crop, for the last decade, and to the detriment, of quality. So. I don't know, guys. Any other thoughts?
Ramon had another comment here. He said it also helps that this depiction of Venom puts every film iteration of it to shame. Those Venom shots in the trailer made a difference. So yeah.
I don't know. Tom Hardy you just hurt his feelings, right? Like,
And that's another story that we saw, right? Tom Hardy giving I'm forgetting Candyman's name now for some reason. He gave him props, right, for his performance, as Venom. And Borbor Country has showed up in the chat. It says, "Hi guys, hey Borbor, thanks so much for swinging through. We appreciate you."
Haha, swinging. All right, let's jump into the next news story here. Actually, next two are ones that I put up there. So, Dreamlight Valley came out last year, I believe in September. If I was looking back, yeah, September 6th, a little over a year now. And it was actually early access, came out for all the consoles, I think PC also. Um, but they're officially going to release on December 5th. I believe it's December 5th, yeah, of this year. But when it came out in early access and pretty much this whole time before this past week, they did state that it was going to be, when it did officially release, it was going to be a free to play game. In this early access release, they actually were sold for $30, which is, not bad, and this is kind of one of those kind of cozy Animal Crossing type games. You have different Disney characters that you're trying to help out. There's a kind of there's a storyline actually behind this section. Not too bad. I played a little bit of it, but this past week, and I got this from Nintendo Life. This story with the announcement of the official release on December 5th, they're actually not going to go free to play now. And they cite here the choice ensures that Disney Dreamlight Valley will be able to continue to deliver a premium game experience for all players. It's important to us that we maintain our promise to keep delivering free content updates that add new characters, realms, clothing, furniture, basically all the stuff you can get in there. Purchase the required moonstones will remain optional fare and match the level of quality players have been to expect. Players will still be able to collect free moonstones via dream snaps and chests, or optional choose to purchase them. So there's still, and this is created by Gameloft, I believe. Yeah. So, kind of that, they're, I think, more known for the mobile games that they've done throughout the years before this. I'm not sure if this is their first console game. I forgot to look that up, or other than just like a port or something. But so as much as I've played it, I can kind of see where people kind of get kind of bummed. And obviously, this is the internet. There's a big fervor once this came out. Because they promised the free to play and all that. You still have the premium shop in the game. I believe there's a battle pass system or type battle pass type thing in the game, if I remember correctly, that you can get. You get different just aesthetic stuff and clothing and stuff like that. But they do say that you can still be able to unlock all the characters within the game, which you've always been able to do. So I don't know. I for all the fervor out there, I think I think it's fine. I suppose yeah, you probably have to grind, obviously, because that's kind of the trappings of these kind of type of games, that you'll have to grind a lot to get those moonstones and whatever currency they've put in there since. I haven't played actually for a while, to be honest with you, probably since early summer or so. But you still be able to get all that stuff within the game, and it's more of the the special costumes, or stuff like that. It's furniture and all that you might have to pay for, or just grind like a million hours or whatever it usually is in these type of games. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that they kind of just did an about face all of a sudden, like all this the whole time that they're saying it's going to be free to play, and then all of a sudden, and actually I was kind of waiting for it to go free to play, even though I'm able to play it myself, at least on Game Pass, because it came out on Game Pass, so I didn't have to pay for it at all. But I kept seeing, sometimes it go on sale, like on the Switch shop and the eShop, and that's kind of where I wanted to get it, so I can kind of really, dive deep into it, because I'm just sitting there on the couch. I can, play some, challenges, or do what I have to do to unlock certain areas and stuff for certain Disney characters. But now, and I'll have to pay for it. So, but I mean, I guess that's fine. I don't know what your guys thought. I don't know if I don't think any of you two guys had played it, but I don't know if you had any thoughts about this.
No, I think my only thought is, after having played Disney Speedway, which is also by Gameloft, right? Like, it doesn't knowing the number of pay hooks in that, it doesn't surprise me that they are looking to maximize that, or have seen the base be maybe it's significant enough that, you know, that, yeah, I'll be curious to see what this, I don't know. I guess I should say from a market perspective, it's an interesting move, and I'll be curious what it does to the player base. As a player who doesn't really care about this game, but I do think like right, because usually it goes the other way. Usually it goes we tried it as a paid game and it goes free to play. Here it's been something that has stayed as a pay game, as a early access game, which was said to go free to play like Disney Speedstorm did, but then pulling back on that is not the move you usually see. So I think that part of it is the unfulfilled promise. Part of it is what are those metrics underneath it that has made them make that decision.
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen those at a macro scale, and I think we're going to see a handful of other moves from game companies throughout this quarter. I mean, GDP is up 5%, right, this quarter. And jobs have been added. And inflation, which was up in the 8% or higher range last year, has been cut in half, in a year's time. So and the dollar is not quite as strong as it was a year ago. But I think the effect that's having is, there's a little less imbalance globally, right, in terms of, the U.S. dollar being so overpowering over other places who have also experienced, creating inflation. So I think as we go into this quarter, that effect is going to cause, gaming companies. We've seen it from PlayStation. We've seen it from Xbox. I think we're going to see it from others who are kind of like, hey, consumer spending is up, GDP is up, inflation is down. Now is not the time that we're going to slash prices. So I wouldn't be surprised to see another move or two, like this.
Yeah, and they also mentioned that people with existing game saves will keep access to their games and their moonstones, which is like in-game currency or that you can use. But I was wondering though, like even though I guess if you're keeping your game save, I'm assuming you could just keep playing, as you were, because usually when you hear early access, and I've had this happen with Ark and a couple other games, that I bought early access. It's like they'll wipe everything once it's officially released. But I guess I'm assuming here it says it keep your game save that.
I would think that's the way Game Loft did it with Disney Speedstorm, is that if you paid for early access, everything that you unlocked up to that point was available to you, and you got bonuses for being an early access person once it went to launch.
Okay. Yeah, and this is later on here. If you go to the full blog post for this announcement from their blog post, there's various packages, obviously, that they'll be available for new players and special offers for those who have supported the game throughout early access. So you'll get some more stuff. All right, let's jump into the last news story, which is some Microsoft reorganization. So through this article is mostly for Xbox. They do talk a little bit about just Microsoft as a whole, but basically after obviously we've had the merger, or it's going to be the merger for Activision Blizzard. Last week they announced that there's some reorganization going through. So Microsoft head of studios and corporate vice president Matt Booty has been promoted to president of game content and studios, and current vice president Sarah Bond has been promoted to Xbox president. She will oversee all Xbox platform responsibilities. And then they go on to say for Matt Booty, his position, will lead in an expanded organization inside Microsoft Gaming that now includes ZeniMax and Bethesda, which I thought was kind of weird. They separated those two because, I mean, basically Bethesda is part of ZeniMax, and I know they're kind of all part of everything now, but I just thought it was kind of weird that they kind of separated those two. But anyways, they go on to say Phil Spencer says ZeniMax will continue to operate as a limited integration entity led by Jamie Leader, I don't know how to say your last name, president and CEO, reporting to Matt. And then he also says the expanded organization inside Microsoft Gaming, noting that an organization that enables Xbox game studios and ZeniMax teams to collaborate effectively will ultimately empower those world-class studios. And then he goes on to say for Sarah Bond, she'll manage the platform of today and build a platform tomorrow, and more her responsibilities, which seems like a lot. Will be in an effort to bring together devices, players and creator experiences, platform engineering, strategy, business planning, data analytics, and business development. So she's got all that under her. Also, with that, there was Chief Marketing Officer for Xbox will be stepping down. Chris Capicella, I believe is how you say his last name. And then with him stepping down, current commercial chief marketing officer Takeshi Numoto will be the chief marketing officer going forward for the Xbox side. And then they go on to say a little bit of Microsoft reorg for vice president and consumer chief marketing officer Yusuf Mendy will now work as Microsoft's executive vice president and consumer chief marketing officer. Finally, Microsoft is moving the consumer sales organization, Microsoft's consumer sales organization, to Phil Spencer's Microsoft gaming team, which will be led by Amy Silverman. So, and I don't know if, I mean, I've been in the corporate world for a while now, so I've seen, moves and people leave, obviously, and, people step up. So I don't know if this is a huge deal, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that we're seeing all these people kind of move around now. I don't know if it was because of the, Activision Blizzard, or if this was, in the cards, or, what it was, but I don't know if you guys had any thoughts.
I'll let DBQ go first.
I think this is probably not something that is dependent on the Activision Blizzard piece. These pieces many of them feel like they've been in motion, right? Sarah Bond took the center stage during the showcase this summer. It feels like so it doesn't feel drastically a surprise. So game logic. You have a little more corporate awareness in terms of Microsoft's workings potentially.
Yeah, so I think this is huge. And I think there's a few nuggets in here. First of all, I mean, my personal impression of Matt Booty, I would not have pegged him as the guy for this job, given all the things that in my mind have gone wrong under his watch. The Halo Infinite first reveal, which as far as we've heard, again, not corroborated, but seemed to be a thing that Phil had kind of let his hands go of and was looking for Matt to oversee, and that didn't seem to go off particularly well. So I wouldn't have pegged him for this, but here we are. Super, super, super interesting that Content and Services gets ZeniMax and Bethesda, and Pete Hines leaves. And I don't necessarily believe that those sequence of events are decoupled. I think that there were some dynamics going on there, whether positive or negative, that resulted in that way. And Matt kind of, gave some foretelling of that kind of over the summer when he made his comments after GDC about Redfall and talked about how much closer he was working with Bethesda and ZeniMax following that release, right, in an attempt to help recover it. And it indicated that was going on under his purview, right? Which, given the loose integration that ZeniMax had enjoyed before, wouldn't have normally been the case, right? I mean, it was still, definitely an Xbox thing to oversee, but I think in the past it would have been much more so seen as a thing that ZeniMax and Bethesda was supposed to kind of see through on their own and just report status. So that's super interesting. And I think the split, Tao, I think is the split between the publishing versus the group of studios, is what they mentioned with that. So also super interesting that the publishing arm reports up through Matt Booty, as well as the actual operational execution of the studios at the program level. The Sarah Bond thing is super interesting. So what this essentially does is it essentially splits Xbox between games and what I would have in the past referred to as hardware. But in this case, it splits the notion of games, and I would say games, Game Pass. So the service, as far as I can tell, is also under Matt. I don't know who else it would be under. Unless maybe it goes under Dave McCarthy, but I don't know that it would. And like I said, in the past, I would refer to it as a split between games and content and hardware. But in our current world, I refer to it as a split between software and platforms. So Matt is getting oversight of software. Sarah's getting oversight of platforms, because the notion of hardware within the Xbox camp is something that I would contend is on the way out the door. And we have the leak right from the upload right for the trials that talks about cohesive hybrid compute, which is just a quote, what it says at the top of that slide. And I will take credit for having predicted that this was behind a lot of Phil Spencer's words earlier in the year when he talked about what the strategy was for Xbox going forward. Their vision statement from this slide is, it's referred to as cohesive hybrid compute. It says, our vision: develop a next generation hybrid game platform capable of leveraging the combined power of the client and cloud to deliver deeper immersion in entirely new classes of game experiences, optimized for real-time gameplay and creators. We will enable new levels of performance beyond the capabilities of the client hardware alone. So again, I will double, triple, quadruple down on this statement and what I said before. I will jump up and down on the table, and I will set multiple trash cans on fire. This is an indication of moving away from and beyond Xbox as a console, right? As their sole solution for delivering games. And I don't mean Xbox plus a bunch of third-party stuff. I mean Xbox as a combined infrastructure and platform to deliver games in a manner that is owned as a technology stack by Microsoft and combines elements of Azure and what they're doing in the cloud with their client. This talks about the box being an x64 box. I will continue to contend that is nobody's running ray tracing, right? Real-time ray tracing and path tracing on a desktop on an x64 processor. That is so that box can go in a data center, in a rack, and support cloud gaming. And we go back to what Phil said earlier this summer, which was, hey, the objective of Microsoft in Xbox is to build a community of gamers that can play where no one is a second-class citizen. What they want is a person playing on console and a person playing on PC and a person playing on mobile and a person playing on the cloud, and they want them to all play at parity, so that in the future, when a person is playing Call of Duty on mobile, they are playing the same Call of Duty that the person on the Nintendo Switch is playing, that the person is on the Xbox thing is playing, that the person is playing in the cloud, and for none of them to feel like they're disadvantaged and getting bodied, right, in terms of a crappy KD because of the hardware platform that they're playing on. And in order to get there, I said, you have to just change the way we build games today. And that's what this thing is, cohesive hybrid compute. And I also mentioned that it was going to take time to build it. It wasn't a this generation thing. It would be lucky if the initial groundwork was laid for it at the beginning of the next generation. But it was going to be something that wouldn't just live on-prem, right, on your desktop. And that's what this thing is. So that is going to be in Sarah's bailiwick, right? And that's what Xbox means. That's what Xbox platforms means. So she's going to be trying to wrangle this thing, right, into existence, which is somewhat amazing. I wouldn't have been surprised for her getting hardware, but I'm super surprised because this is the thing that determines whether or not Xbox lives or dies. It's not software. Let me walk that back a little bit. Xbox is going to live or die as one of two things. Either it's going to live as a publishing arm, which is Matt Booty's line of business, or it's going to continue to live as a platform plus software business, but that's dependent upon Sarah's organization being successful. So it's just going to be super interesting to kind of see how this unfolds.
I want to make a comment. I want to make a comment. I'm not going to, but on the corporate speak about Matt Booty, because I've seen things happen in corporations before where you think, oh, what is this person doing? And then they get, lifted up in the company. But you know what? I'm just gonna be quiet for now. I'll just leave that alone. DB, any other thoughts on that? Are we talking about? No. All right. So let's jump over to our round robin and DB. You weren't here when I was talking. I missed this. Uh, I said that we didn't have any spooky games that we've been playing, but you've been playing. Maybe not spooky, but horrorish type of game.
Yeah, right. It's Halloween week. I figured I should break out something spooky-ish. So I had not checked out the Resident Evil 4 remake on PS5 this past year when it came out. So I had a chance to check it out this week. It is beautiful. Looks great on 4K. It's still Resident Evil 4, right? I mean, like, that's not a bad thing, right? Like, the gameplay is a lot smoother. It's a little more fluid. It still is very much the game. I don't know, game design, I guess is the word I'm looking for, right? Like, we've got narrow passages. We've got the same aspects that Resident Evil 4 had. The first 6 times it was released are still there, but it's a little more fluid, at least from what I've played. It's super beautiful. Game Logic, I know you played it a little bit back when it came out this spring. Am I saying anything that is factually incorrect? Like,
No, I mean, I think it's a gorgeous game. Yeah, I mean, the remastering of it looks great. It's not, as far as I could tell, and I didn't play a ton of RE4 back in the day. It's not really the redesign that Resident Evil 2 remake was. In some ways, I feel like it's a little. You could argue that it's a little less ambitious, but then my argument is it didn't have as much of a lift that it needed from where it was.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of how I'm feeling about it too, right? Like, after playing RE2 and feeling how it feels more modern, and but also that was coming from that fixed camera perspective, where RE4 kind of set the template for modern third-person action games, and people have kind of iterating, chasing it in a variety of capacities. So you're right, it didn't have a harder lift. It is a celebration of that game, and it is a much more enjoyable, fluid way to experience it at this point in time.
Yeah, it kind of. I think the way I describe it is it kind of. It gives it that last final lift to take it over the line for meeting the potential that it always had. Right, whereas the Resident Evil 2 remake arguably is a transformative state, right?
I mean, it's almost a totally different game, right? I mean,
yeah.
Like, narrative beats are very similar, but in terms of gameplay, it's completely different experience.
Yeah, Tao, you mentioned your line of work. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the terms of digital transformation and all that. Like, when I compare the two, about like RE2 to RE2 remake is transformative, right? RE4 to RE4 remake remaster, right, is modernization. So it's a step back in terms of scale. It's no less beautiful. It's like what they delivered is nothing less. But I think from a critical perspective, it's kind of weird. Obviously we're in that time of the year where people are making up their game of the year list for whatever that's worth. But it's interesting that a lot of times I see Resident Evil 4 remake on people's list, and I'm like, I don't think it's the technical accomplishment that some people think it is. Again, not in terms of its final delivery, but just in terms of how the total distance, right, that it had to go. Like, look, that Greek ran a full-blown 26 miles of marathon, right, to get from RE2 to RE2 remake. That person did not run a full marathon, right, to get to from RE4 to RE4. But it looks great. It's weird that it faces, in my mind, kind of stiff competition when you in mind share when you think of it in comparison to the Dead Space remake from this year.
Sure, right. That's a very good point in terms of that remake space. And I think, and potentially, right, having the Ada Wong expansion that just came out, the DLC, adds to that. And again, just because it doesn't feel like a completely different game doesn't make it a bad game. It is still an incredibly important piece of video game history, and it's a great way to experience it.
So one question on that DBQ, just so reaching for something available on PlayStation 5, I'm assuming was part of the entry criteria. Reaching for a horror remake right in spooky times. Just any reason why you landed on RE4 instead of the Dead Space remake?
No, not really. I mean, I guess yes, I will say I enjoy the campiness of Ari's story, right? Like, I have sat through multiple computer generated RE movies, quote unquote, right? Like, I enjoy the characters, and I enjoyed the characterization back in 2003, 4 when this came out. Yes, so I think that is why. Also, that I have also played the 4K patches to RE2 and RE7 on PlayStation 5, so I was curious to have that kind of picture comparison as well.
Nice. All right. For myself, for what little I was able to play this past week, I did jump a little bit back into the Dungeons of Eternity, um, and this is just a fun game to me. Like I love going in there and just like smacking down skeletons and zombies and these like wizard-like creatures that pop up every once in a while. And I'm up to I think maybe mid 30ish level right now, 33, 34, somewhere around there, 35. And I think the max is 50. So I've seen, these are procedurally generated dungeons you go into and stuff like that. And for the most part, you kind of see like kind of the same stuff every when you're going through, even especially in the lower levels. But even now, like I've seen a lot of, I've seen most of everything I thought, and now like I was playing the other night, and I was like, oh wow, I've never seen this kind of room before. This layout of the dungeon, and even even a monster that I had never seen before, like kind of like a mini boss basically that you can do within the game. There's three right now that I've seen. So kind of this big rock golem. You got this big. I don't even know how to. It's just big. It almost kind of looks like those big brown like Doom enemies where they have the big mouth and stuff like that. Kind of looks like that. And now there's this big like tentacle, like kraken type tentacle that comes out of this kind of like watery area that you can kind of go through sometimes. So I'd never seen that, and it's kind of interesting. I'm still seeing all this new kind of layouts and enemies. Most of them, the main like kind of I don't say generic, but the ones you just kind of run into as you're going through, those are pretty much have been the same. You got just like skeletons and zombies, some spiders every so often, like these like slime creatures, which is kind of weird thing that pops up every once in a while, like giant like wasp type creatures. So those are pretty much the staples that you see as you're going through. Excuse me. But it's just kind of these like bigger set pieces that I'm still running into new stuff. So it's just kind of cool that I still run into things. And of course, even though the weapons and stuff, they're randomized, like what you can get also. So not everybody gets the same type of status effect on certain weapons and stuff like that. So I'm seeing new stuff all the time, and I got like three. You can do 3 different loadouts on your one character that you're using, and I do like 3 specific loadouts now, like a wizard one, and like a barbarian one, and one that's just like an archer type of thing, stuff like that. So it's kind of cool that I can, and every time I go into a dungeon, I'll switch out, kind of like I do like in Call of Duty. Game Logic knows that when we played, and he even I think he kind of does it too sometimes, where he's like constantly just switching out to different guns and stuff like that. So I'm kind of doing the same thing in this game where I am switching out to the different weapons. So it's just kind of cool that I'm still finding new stuff, and I think now I finally started hitting legendary weapons. I think I might have mentioned that last week too. I'm starting to see them a lot more now. So that's kind of nice. So I just got like a legendary build where I just use all legendary gear. So it's kind of nice that I can flip between those ones. So just have a lot of fun with it. And there was another game, Sword. I think it's Sword and Sorcery. I believe it was, which is kind of similar vein, but it's more realistic graphics. And I jumped back into that just to, because I have the Quest 3 now, so I was kind of playing around with that. And I still, fortunately, I know I mentioned this, I think a week or two, even 2 weeks ago, I still haven't gone to go through like the Quest 3's like AR stuff as much as what I wanted to since the first time I had it. So I still got to kind of put that through the test. But I just wanted to go back, kind of look at other games and see how they ran. And, it looked fine. It looks is about as what I had expected from before. But just the gameplay, even though it's more like physics based and kind of like Legendary Tales, which is another game that I want to go back and try. It didn't seemed a little clunky to me, like doing the sword and sorcery one. So I don't know. I think this one kind of just moves. It's basically like the Call of Duty of the VR games that I'm playing right now. I think kind of more faster paced, and it just feels a lot better than when I'm playing it. So I'm gonna continue doing this game. My one friend, he pretty much, well, he didn't max out his character yet. I think he said he was in his mid 40s right now, but he kind of found like the weapon he wanted. He was looking for. It was actually not even a weapon. It's a healing staff that you can heal you players, and you can revive people when they're down and stuff like that. So he's kind of fallen off a little bit on it. So I'm still having fun though, just playing with random people. And I tried playing solo, but I don't know. It seemed kind of easy, a little bit too easy when I'm playing solo, even when I was like a low tier character. So I'll probably you can just do like a quick join where you just join a quick match of whoever has a game open. So I've just been doing that lately, and for the most part I usually find some pretty cool people that you can fight with. So I'm going to continue going on with that. DB, you had one more, unless either of you had any comments on that one.
No, nice to see you getting mileage out of it. Still great to hear from both your games this week in terms of playing on the MetaQuest. So yeah, just a quick update on Wildcard Football. So this is the arcade football from Saber. It came out at the beginning of October. One of the things that happened with release is that there's a kind of card, I don't know, kind of card caching, card trading system in the game that wasn't working. They just released a patch this week. So basically, if you had duplicate cards, you could kind of, cash them in and get tickets to be able to purchase other players at different positions or other higher level rarities, basically to kind of continue to fill out your players. They've been out with the community on Reddit and on X and communicating in their Discord in terms of kind of the awareness and what they're trying to do for the patch. And so they got that out after a few weeks now, and so that's functional in the game, and everybody that had it prior to, or everybody that launches the game during the next week or so, gets another 1,500 tickets or so, which is enough for like a gold tier character. So just that, nice. It's a smaller game with not a lot of, it's not a huge team doing it. And the fact that they continue to fix some of the things that were broken upon launch is a nice sign. So just an update there.
Nice. All right. Let's jump to the end of the episode here. DB, got anything you're going to be playing here up next this week?
I'm sure I need to finish I want to finish my Slay the Princess narrative piece and see where that takes me.
Nice. And Game Logic, it looks like you're going to be doing some more Baldur's Gate 3.
I will. I'll be jumping into a comfy chair and pulling the Steam Deck off into handheld mode as soon as we jump off this podcast.
Nice. You jump into your footy pajamas with the Steam Deck.
in my Snuggie.
Your Snuggie, yeah. There's one other game that I actually kind of played in VR. It's called War Wizards. I'm going to try to jump into that a little bit more. It's actually a game that my son kind of turned me on to while he's watching his YouTube videos that it popped up for him. So he wanted to get it. So I bought it for him, or he bought it, I should say. Had to buy it through my account. Kind of a MOBA tower defense-ish kind of game. So it's kind of interesting. I played a couple of quick games. I did like a tutorial and then like one PvP game. So I'm going to jump to that a little bit more, hopefully this week, and then probably some more Dungeons of Eternity. So that's about it. Anything else before we end the show for tonight? Any other comments on anything?
DBQ about 4 hours to beat Slay the Princess. So
yep, that's what I heard as well. So yes, I will be able to report back and not try to give too much away at the same time.
Nice. All right. Thanks for Ramon and Borbor for stopping by in the comment section tonight. And thanks for anybody else who might have been watching live or who will watch in the future. Please like and comment or subscribe on the Ramon has one more comment. He says, I want to play Baldur's Gate, but I have to limit how many million-hour games I play per year. what was that? Legend.
Yeah, the Tears of the
Legend of Zelda,
Kingdom.
Tears of the Kingdom. I couldn't remember
Yep.
what it was called. Tears of
And
the Kingdom, Witcher 3, and Elden
Ramon,
Ring.
thank you. Like I forgot that the current gen patch for Witcher 3 came out all the way back in January, right? Talking about updates to previous games with RE. That's another one right there that came out this year as well.
Yep. And Ashla Bobor says, good podcast. Thank you, Bobor. And thank you once again, Ramon. Yeah, I think we mentioned that too this past year throughout the months. Like there's been a lot of big games that have been coming out this past year and year and a half, or even if you want to go back into 2022. So a lot of stuff to play. Thank you guys. And thank you everybody else who has gone and watched us possibly on the video and on demand. DB, Game Logic, thank you for joining me tonight. DB, sorry for the late start there.
No, that's my own technical fault. So thanks for jumping in to host. So,
yep. All right. So, everybody out there, please keep playing those games. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, next week, Game Logic, you will be the main host with, I believe, DB and myself should still be on there. With
we may let DB come back up and pinch hit in the rotation.
Force me to fill in after bailing tonight. Yeah, sure. I'll do that.
Nah, that's okay. It happens. So please come back next week for, well, one of us will be the main host and we'll all be here anyway, so it doesn't matter. Play those games out there and take care of each other's. We will see you next time.